Welcome to Joy in the Breakthrough, a podcast where we'll be talking to a wide range of leaders from different generations and backgrounds. These leaders have found power in being broken open. I'm Connie Lindsey.
And I'm Anna Valencia. We are your hosts, and we believe that our challenges can lead to breakthroughs, and we want to share those insights with you.
We hope these stories will inspire you to explore the I'm possible in you.
Today's episode, we will be talking about mentoring and the power that mentoring has had on our lives. And I want to start with a quick story for our listeners that you heard in the last episode. Connie and I talked about how we met and how it naturally became mentoring. And we heard so much feedback, great feedback from family, friends, mentees about diving deeper into our conversations from episode 1 and episode 2. And so we want to really talk about the power of mentoring today. So if you didn't hear in episode 2, I think, Connie and I met on a panel. And we both were talking about diversity and inclusion. And I was literally sitting there writing word for word of what she said. And I, got the courage to ask her after the panel if she would have coffee with me, if we could sit down and just get connected. I was fangirling. I'm not going to lie.
So grateful you did.
But I was so excited when she said yes. And so I got on her schedule, and God divine, how it works, how the universe puts us together. But the day that I was to meet her for coffee was my first ever budget hearing in front of the city council. And for those that you don't know how city council works, I have to go into in front of this budget committee, in front of all 50 alder people, and I have to talk about why I need my budget. And so that day, I was in the den of the lions, and it was a 4-hour hearing, and we took a break. And my team said, should we cancel your coffee with Connie Lindsey? I said, absolutely not, because it's going to take forever to get back onto her calendar. So I went down there to Northern Trust, walked down the street. We had our lovely coffee. I could be myself and open up to you in an honest way about what I was facing in that moment, in that day. And you were so encouraging. And you picked me up and you said a prayer for me, and I went back down into my budget hearing and finished the day. And I always remember that kindness. And so over time, our friendship grew into a mentorship. I think even you would say sometimes both ways.
Of course.
And so for me, that's kind of one of the ways we met and you became a mentor. But from this last episode, we want to tackle those questions our mentees have. But I also know we heard a lot of great feedback about how you broke down the word coach, mentor, and sponsor. And I would love to hear even further what you mean in those roles and what those roles mean.
Sure. First of all, I just want to say, Anna, it was a pleasure meeting you and getting to know you. First, on that panel, we share a lot of the same values, our core values we share in common. The second part of that was to see just all of the energy and the joy that you even had then about service and learning and being a constant learner. And from that, the conversations that we've had, both professionally and personally, it has just drawn us closer together. I think in our common bond and goal of trying to do good in the world. That sounds simplistic, but it is really true. As a Girl Scout, we always say we want to make the world a better place. So that's certainly something that is important to me. And having been coached, mentored, and sponsored, I talk a lot about those 3 terms and what they actually mean. Quickly, I say coaches talk at you, mentors talk to you, and sponsors talk about you. Coaches, if you think about a coach on a sports team, that person is talking about the plays, crafting the plays, telling you how to do that. Mentors, that mentor is a trusted advisor. That is the individual with whom you can have a conversation about concerns, things you want to learn, really be able to be as transparent as you can be. That sponsor, on the other hand, generally is someone who is in a position of power. They can talk about you when you're not in the room. And we can talk more about this, but certainly from a career perspective, they know enough about you, your capabilities, and your skills, and they are able to have the conversation that says, this person is ready for this next position. Or if you are looking for support in a specific area, they use their network, they use their own credibility to advance you and what is most important to you. And all 3 are critical in our careers. They can be one and the same in terms of sponsorship. Generally, they're not, but certainly sponsorship is important as well as mentoring and coaching. And I'll say being an individual who is teachable and willing to learn.
I think that's so important. And it's so interesting about sponsorship because in government or the public sector, that does not exist. I've heard of mentoring, and I've had mentees and also been mentored myself. I've had coaching, executive coaching, which has been different, but I've never had the sponsorship piece. So I think that's is interesting for our listeners who may not be in corporate America. Now, how did you find your sponsors? Like, how did you decide to take them under your wings and sponsor them in corporate America?
So the individuals that I sponsor, I've been sponsored as well. I think it's important to understand that. And the reason that I know it has power is because I've been sponsored. Oftentimes for women and people of color, we get promoted based on past performance versus potential. What a sponsor does is that individual can go in and talk about your capabilities and your skills. We don't have to have 100% of the requirements in order to move forward in a particular role. And so for me, that whole notion of sponsorship is critically important because there are people that I want to see succeed and grow and do well in whatever their career is. And Harvard Business Review did some research and in a study that talked about sponsorship specifically as it related to women and people of color. And what they found was that for people of color, only 5% of Black people specifically generally have sponsorship in corporations, whereas over 20% of non-Black people or white people have that, and the difference it's made in their careers. And I'll say about sponsorship for me individually, we do have to pay attention to the individuals that we're sponsoring, because if I'm going to put my reputation and my resources and so on the line for an individual, I need to make sure that they're ready in terms of being able to handle what it means to move forward in the career. So that's crucial. That's been really important. And there's a lot of data around what sponsorship means to individuals in their career development.
And I think that's so crucial and critical for women and people of color when it comes to sponsorships. One thing I want to go back to that you said that I thought was really good is about the gift of feedback and being, what kind of a mentee looks like. And one of the things that I love when I mentor or decide to coach someone is that they are always willing to learn, that they're curious, that they ask questions, that they're interested in engaging. And I love the follow-ups, the emails I'll get. I won't hear from a mentee for a while. I'll get a text or an email about something that they tried, a piece of advice we gave, and they tried and it worked, or building their confidence. And so, I love that when mentees will be responsive and proactive about giving us updates, because I think that's so important. But the gift of feedback can be hard to take. In a lot of places. But I think what they know, they can trust with their mentor, it's willing to be received.
And there's a skill to giving feedback. In my corporate career, I would often say to people, the giving feedback is not trying to tear a person apart or reduce them to something less than what they are, which is a divine creation, a divine idea in the mind of God, in my perspective. And so giving good feedback allows you to help the individual grow. We have to be open to it, but there's a good way to deliver it. For example, whenever I did performance reviews with my team, I would not say, you are rated blah, and fill in the blank. I would often use the words, my experience of you, and give really specific examples. My experience of you when you're nervous in a meeting, my experience of you when you're asking questions, all of those things, so that I'm not judging you. I'm giving you feedback, because then we can act on it. Even the way that feels when I say to you, Anna, my experience of you is joy. That you enjoy the work that you do. You care deeply about the people who follow you and that you lead. That's very different than saying, Anna, you act happy all the time. Just a different feeling, right? So that's another part of that feedback, but being willing to receive it. Also, when it's corrective. We know that planes, when they're flying, there's constant feedback. What's the altitude? What's the pressure in the cabin? All of those things. So being able to receive it is equally as important, and knowing the people from whom you're getting it. Because we know everybody isn't happy for us when we're doing things. So it's being mindful of those individuals from whom we choose to receive feedback as well.
Yeah, everyone has to have a hype person. And then I always say, the haters are going to hate, so let it roll off. But take that hype person with you. And I'm being mentoring, right? If you're listening, this is what mentoring looks like, because I'm just taking all the notes from Connie and all of her gems.
Hi, I'm Darius Hillman. Joining me on the next edition of In the Arena, the Inspector General for the City of Chicago, Deborah Witzberg. Take a look.
I'm a true believer in the power of government to do good. We owe Chicagoans a better government than the one they've gotten.
Join the conversation Tuesday at 7 p.m. on CAN TV 19 and streaming on cantv.org and the new CAN TV Plus app.
So what's different about this episode today is we actually reached out to our mentees and we asked them questions. What would you like to hear about the Power Mentoring episode? What kind of feedback would you like, or to hear the gems that Connie's dropping? So let's dive into some of our questions. Let's start with, you said your mentees were blowing you up the other day. So let's start with some of their questions.
And I'd also like to say, though, I'm mentored too. I'm mentored by Anna. This is an intergenerational program. Our goal for this podcast, it's intergenerational. So there are all kinds of ways that I learn. I'm constantly learning. I'm open to feedback. My joke sometimes from one of my nieces, we would talk about different things, whether it's technology, social media, blah, blah, blah. And she'd say, Auntie, you're having an 8-track moment. Now, for those of you who don't know what an 8-track is or have never seen one, it is an interesting comment, which I then jokingly say I'm taking her out of my will. But it is me being mentored all the time. And I've learned from you. This podcast is a part of your vision and you mentoring me, the I'm possible of what we're doing today.
Yes.
So let's dive into the
dive
questions.
in.
All right, let's do it.
Your first one, do you want to kick it off with the first one?
Sure. We talked about the difference between a mentor, a coach, and a sponsor, and I gave you those definitions. And so what I'd say in terms of how you think about that, think about if there's a skill or something that you want to develop. Look at a person who does it with excellence, and then talk to that person about being a mentor to
I like
you,
that.
right? And how you approach them. Be prepared. Read their bio. Get as much information as you can. Come with 3 good questions that you can ask that individual.
Don't waste their time.
Don't waste their time. Exactly. Get on their calendar, all of those sorts of things. For the coaching piece, if there's something that you want to learn, once again, find someone who does that particular thing at a level of excellence that you want to emulate. And remember, be yourself. Everyone else is taken. You're not trying to be that person. You want to have the skills that they have, but you want to do it in your own way. There's a uniqueness that you bring to that. And sponsorship, as I said, someone who talks about you when you're not in the room, someone that trusts you and that you can trust, and that I'm willing to invest in you. And we then get to see the benefit of that, because I've sponsored people who have done incredibly well in their career. And that benefit inures to me as a coach, a sponsor, and a leader. People want to be a part of a team that you're being sponsored and your career or your aspirations are manifested. And that's vitally important as well.
And I love the piece about coaching. I got an executive coach about 2 years ago, and someone told me great advice that I should interview a couple. And I did interview a couple, and where I landed was someone that was also very faith-centered and our values aligned. And I also thought I should get a woman. I was like, I want another woman executive. But sometimes different perspectives really helps you sharpen your tools or see things or gaps where you need to grow. And so I was incredibly excited about my coach. But if you're looking for an executive coach, it's like shopping for shoes. You got to get the right fit.
For sure.
And so I think that's important for folks listening. And, I'm 38. I didn't get a coach until 2 years ago. So it's never too early or too late. They tell you not to get a coach in a chaotic moment in your life. I did not do that part, but it was perfect timing for me.
Sure.
And I think it's a well investment if you can do it. It definitely helps you build confidence and courage when you're able to get an executive coach.
It's really important. And as you've said, Anna, we really need to make sure that we are interviewing people, because I get calls from people offering to be my executive coach or coach me on
I
things.
bet they do, but you could coach them.
Well, and it's okay. For me, it's not an ego thing. It's just being very clear about how people perceive themselves as a coach. How can we grow from that individual? Another point I'd make about mentoring as well is you can have a mentor for a specific period of time. They don't have to stay with you forever.
Yes.
You can outgrow your mentors, and wise mentors, as I often do. This is as far as we can go based on what you felt like you needed to gain and get from me or for us to grow together. So it's okay to move on. We have a relationship that's long lasting, but we don't have to stay in this mentoring relationship forever. So it's okay to move forward and to move on.
Minus me, I'll be with you forever. You can't get rid of me. Sorry.
I accept that.
So another great question we got from our mentees: do you have any networking advice, and are there any networking groups that you think I should join? So one thing that I think is really important is that we always think about networking up. And my girlfriend and I, when we were in the mayor's office, we were young, 25, 26-year-olds, and we didn't have a network. And we were in a professional area. And so while we thought we should be networking up, we decided actually to network with other women that were in different sectors in Chicago and expand our reach outside of just government and politics. So she invited 5 friends. I invited 5 friends, different sectors: education, technology, legal field, you name it, corporate. We all met in the West Loop. We had some free pizza and a place donated, and we called ourselves the Power Pumps. And this was organic. We didn't have a nonprofit. We didn't have, we just kind of paid out of pocket or found people to sponsor our events. And it grew from 10 women to over 200 women. We had people like Christy Hefner come speak to us, the former CEO of Lifeway, Julie Smolansky, came to speak to us, all free. They just came and gave their time, volunteered their time. We were able to ask questions and ask, how did you navigate your career? How did you ask for a raise? All these important things that we didn't know in our 20s. And so to this day, I still run into people who are former Power Pumps, and they say, can you start this again? And I wish I had the time to do a 2.0, because you have different things in your late 30s or your 40s that you're now battling or trying to navigate, which is why we're doing this pod.
For sure.
So I think it's incredibly important that you don't have to join a certain club. You can create your own table, and you can set your own table with other women or men or people of color, whoever you need to energize you and help grow you. And that network is important, because as you grow in your career, people in that Power Pump space went on to do other great things. And so now I can tap them in the philanthropy area or in different spaces where I might need some guidance or support in the role that I'm in now.
For sure.
And so I think it's so important that you can grow together and network across. So just don't feel like you've got to join something established.
Right. And for those introverts like me out there, networking is not something I enjoy. So I'm very intentional about the way that I network. I am not the person who wants to be at every cocktail party and so on.
Oh,
But for
Connie
me-
needs to know the start time and the end time.
right? So I can come in, do what I need to do, and leave. And so it is important for me to have that. So for those who do strategic networking, as I call it, I like to know what the event is about, what the expectations are, and then I can identify maybe one or two people with whom I'll have a conversation, make a connection, and then have that work for me. So the things that we're leaving you with is, number one, you can create your own network. Make sure that it works for you. Your network needs to work. Number two, be strategic about how and where you network so that you're not known as the person who runs to every event and is constantly giving out cards or trying to do that. Be strategic about that. And the relationships should be authentic.
Be authentic. Don't be transactional.
Yeah. For sure.
Because you can feel the transactional. And yes, networking goes both ways. You may need something from them. They may need something from you. But you want to not be transactional, because that turns someone off.
For sure.
And then they're not going to
For
want
sure.
to support you anymore.
Exactly.
So I think it's incredibly important to do that. Let's go to our next question.
Okay. One of the questions we have that I thought was wonderful is about what books have you read along the way to help in your career path? We're both avid readers. I know that I am. Give us a couple of yours, Anna, and I'll give you a couple of mine.
Sure. So my pastor sent me this book. This was a former pastor and CEO. His name is Carey Nieuwhof, and it's called At Your Best. And what I love, it's a pretty quick read, but he talks about the different energy levels. What does your energy level look like? These green zones, red zones, yellow zones for work. And I found that I do my best work in the morning at 3 or 4 o'clock is a red zone. That's like coffee time or just, downtime. And then after 8:30, I'm a zombie. So really trying to work within these zones and finding what works for your energy. I thought it was really interesting. He also talked about that we are not made to have 1,000 friends, that we're actually made to really have 75 really deep friendships. And those goes and, there's your inner circle and then kind of goes outer there of acquaintances. And so I think that's so important to think about when social media, where you think you have to be something to 1,000 people, but really you really don't have to do that. So it just gave me some really good tips in terms of how to work in your energy level, calendaring, how do you calendar your life. So I really enjoyed it. And my other book is Oprah, The Life You Want, Journal. I'm doing it right now. It started in a season I really needed some kind of guidance and thought-provoking questions. And so I started it last fall. You start with a vision board, and then each section is about integrity. And I'm in renewal right now, the section of renewal. And it asks you just really great prompting questions, gratitude in the morning. And it's just a way. She also has a great thing that's a done list instead of a to-do list.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that really makes me feel like I accomplished something by filling out that done list. So those are two books that I've read that I'm really enjoying.
I love it. And I think one thing you said I'll come back to in talking about social media and how we say who we are relative to those influences. My two books, the first one is A More Beautiful Question. I think when we ask beautiful questions, it opens people up. That book is by Warren Berger. And asking a more beautiful question allows us to get to know people and to spend time with them. The second is Dare to Lead by Brene Brown.
Oh, I love
She's
that
one of my
one.
favorite authors, and she talks very much about connecting emotions to leadership. And so that has been one of the books that I've read and recommend. It's just a great way to help people break open to break through.
Now it's our tips and techniques segment where we will give you a tip and technique to use. And today it's about power mentoring. So mine is be brave, be bold, and make the ask. If you see someone that is interesting or you want to have coffee with or talk to about mentoring or sponsoring you, just ask. 90% of the time, they're going to say yes. Connie, what's yours?
I thought of a more beautiful question, and that question is, do you choose or are you chosen when it comes to mentoring? My answer to that would be it happens both ways. We can have a mentor choose us because of the excellence of the work that we're doing or a particular skill for which we've known, or we can choose a person, as you've said, Anna, thinking about something that we want to learn from them or having them support us. So think about that question as you talk to people who might be your mentors or as you observe someone displaying a skill that you might want to pick up for yourself.
And this brings us to our last segment of Say Less. Connie has taught us to say more by saying less. So what is your word today, Connie?
As this was the power of mentoring, this was our segment. So the word is mentor. And the etymology of the word mentor comes from Homer's Odyssey, which is Greek mythology. And the word mentor really means trusted advisor. And it's the story of Telemachus, who trusted his son to mentor, who was a person in that mythology. So that trusted advisor. And we encourage everybody to think about who that is for them, that mentor, which is so important. And it creates lifelong, lasting relationships.
Yes, and I'm so happy that I had that courage to ask you
Grateful
such
you
a long
did.
time ago and that you said yes.
And look at us today.
And look at us today. Well, I wish we had more time to have this conversation, but we got to end here. I hope you will join us for the next episode of Joy in the Breakthrough, where we bring Anna Deshawn, our executive producer, from behind the curtain into the hot seat to hear her amazing story and her tips and techniques. Thank you for joining us. This is Joy in the Breakthrough.